try and be very quick so we've got maximum time for questions. I'm not quite sure what hat it is I'm supposed to be wearing when I stand here. Can I just say that the issue for me is as legal ombudsman, in the end I am responsible to the Ministry of Justice. So I am a good, proper civil servant. However, I also used to be the Chief Executive of Shelter, and there may be some bits that I might wish to say in that capacity. So can I just start off by saying anything that I say that's newsworthy or controversial, I say as the ex-Chief Executive of Shelter. The good civil servant never said a word out of place, all right? Are you okay with that as the rules? Barrett said, what's the future of the advice sector, and used the word grim. I can think of some other four-letter words that I might use at the same time. However, let's just be honest about that. Things are horrible. We know that the way that public sector finances are going, the likelihood is that they're going to get more horrible. That's just the truth. The question is, what can we do about it? And I think we can do some stuff about it. What I wanted to say is just briefly, not so much about the advice sector. I think that would be, for me, having been out of it now for 3 or 4 years, that would be deeply patronising. But to maybe talk about some bits in other sectors that I see going on. I think the first thing we've got to think about, obviously, is efficiencies and cost cutting. I mean, that I did in Shelter, and that was horrible. That was really, really, really unpleasant for everybody concerned. And you've got to grit your teeth and do it, but you have to do it. And the result of what we did in Shelter is that, having done some really nasty remodelling and upsetting quite a lot of people in the process, nevertheless, the organisation's finances over the last 3 years have been absolutely fine, and in fact they help more people with less money than they ever did. It is possible to do remodelling. It does take bravery, it does take a considerable amount of effort, but it is possible, and you can do more for less. It is absolutely possible to do, and I think that's our first obligation. In the sector, our duty is not to ourselves and our own jobs. Our duty is to maximise the return on the investment we get for the benefit of our end users, and that means using as little of it on ourselves as we humanly can. And it's sometimes difficult for us to remember that, but nevertheless that's the truth. Second point I wanted to make was about the use of technology. I know that you've had some of that this morning, but it is absolutely essential, and it is a huge opportunity. One of the great joys of the job that I've just inherited is I got to set up an organisation from scratch, and I got to build it around the technology that I wanted. And the result of just narrowly the investment in decent quality technology means that a job that was being done for £32 million a year previously is now being done for £17 million a year. And that is not because we're a hell of a lot better than our predecessors, just because we can do stuff, instead of doing stuff face to face, we can do stuff over the phone, we can do stuff on a proper casework management system. We have halved the costs over the previous iteration of the sort of service I run, just out of the proper investment in technology. Now, of course that takes money. Of course, I'm not being silly about it, but if you can get your hands on that and you can use it wisely, you can do more for less. In Shelter, we built a website. When I arrived 7 years, at the start of 7 years, we were seeing about 100,000 people face to face. By the time I left, we built an advice website that was getting 1.2 million individual hits, individual users during every 12-month period. And that was just, again, an investment in technology. It's no substitute for face-to-face. Nevertheless, those people were getting real help. I know we talk about digital exclusion, etc., 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 and those are very real issues, but you do get a huge level of volume through investment in technology if you can get hold of the money. The third bit I think we should really, really think about is in terms of income diversification. Can we find sources of income that are not from the traditional means? I'm very struck in that by a charity that I get involved with, which is called Fair Share, which redistributes surplus supermarket food, surplus food to feed people in need. I'd share it. They were very stuck financially 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and they came up with a new funding model which involved, rather than going to supermarkets begging for food, they would actually charge the supermarkets for taking it away. Because what they did is to work out that it cost the supermarkets more to pay for it to go in landfill. So if they could undercut that figure, they could actually get paid for taking food. And that's what they did. Again, hasn't cut their total reliance on trust funding and so on and so forth, but it gives them another income stream. Now, I hear Barrett talking about aping some of the income streams that are going into existing commercial operations through looking at some of what the new acquisitive legal services providers are doing. There are huge risks in that. There are risks for charging clients. There are risks around that stuff, and this is where I might put my legal ombudsman hat on at some point if we get in there. But I think those are exactly the right questions to be asking. What other income streams can we find? So there are some things I would suggest very strongly that we can do. We can look at maximising technology. We can look at efficiencies. We can look at income streams. But the major thing, I think, is to think about the new policy solutions for the world that is to come. There is no question but that over the next 10 or 15, well, the next 5 or 10 years, that the pressure on legal aid funding is just going to go down and down and down. There's no doubt about that. I say that as Shelter, but you say that as anybody that can look at public finances. So if the money is not going to come from the traditional government route for the traditional product, how can you convince government to invest money? What are the new policy mechanisms, the new funding mechanisms that can be invented? While, I would suggest, while we are trying to manage our way through the next few years and doing the best we can for the people that we can help, and that is our primary objective, nevertheless we need to use our brains, our imagination, to try and come up with a new model. The notion that things are going to go back to the way they were when money swims back into the economy is highly questionable. When I was at Shelter, people were bemoaning the collapse of the council house. Nobody invests in council house building anymore. The notion that somebody is again going to invest billions of pounds in building council housing is just stupid. It's never going to happen. You've got to invent the new funding models. So along with managing through the process, it does seem to me our primary obligation is to use our brains to present back to government, to policymakers, to Willie and his colleagues, if and when they eventually get back into, when, Willie, obviously, you eventually get back into government. What are the policies that you're going to ask Willie to implement? Because asking him to implement a wholesale restoration of legal aid and advice service funding just ain't going to cut it. There's got to be a future policy that we have to give back. Thank you.
Thank you.